He saw the alien princess cry and realized she chose him. He was a mid-level aide, sent to the bustling capital of the Virene system to assist in what humans called interstellar diplomacy. The Virene were an ancient race, their cities stretching into the skies like crystalline towers that shimmered under multiple suns. To a human eye, the sheer scale of it was overwhelming. Yet to the Virene, it was just the way life had always been, grand, precise, and impeccably ordered. Elias walked through the polished halls of the central palace, careful not to draw attention. The corridors were wide, lined with smooth, reflective panels that changed color depending on the angle of the light. He could feel the weight of history pressing down, as if every stone, every beam, and every surface had seen centuries of rulers, diplomats, and intrigue. And here he was, a human, an outsider whose people had barely been admitted into the Interstellar Alliance, walking among the elites of the galaxy. The negotiations had been long and tedious. Sarilith, the princess of House Virene, was present, of course, as she always was. She was considered perfect by her people, graceful, intelligent, composed. Everyone in the alliance knew her name and most approached her with a combination of reverence and fear. Elias had seen her several times in meetings, her gaze steady, her expression flawless. But he had never expected to see what he would witness that night. The talks had stretched into the evening. Most delegates had returned to their quarters, leaving only a skeleton staff to tidy the documents and oversee security. Elias had been assigned to review some minor reports near the palace garden, a large courtyard filled with alien flora that glowed faintly in the soft evening light. The Virene gardens were not like Earth gardens. The plants seemed to hum with energy, their leaves pulsing slowly, and the flowers opened and closed with a rhythm that made the courtyard feel alive. As Elias adjusted the data pad in his hands, he noticed a figure sitting on a stone bench beneath a flowering tree. Her back was to him, and at first he thought it was one of the palace attendants. But as he stepped closer, he realized it was the princess herself. She was alone, a rare occurrence in the palace, and she was crying. Her shoulders shook softly, and a few tears fell onto the smooth stone beneath her. Elias froze, unsure of what to do. He had read about the Virene and their strict codes of conduct. To see a princess, especially Sarilith, in such a vulnerable state was unthinkable. It went against everything the galaxy believed about her. She was supposed to be perfect, untouchable, and flawless. Yet here she was, just a being, showing a very human emotion. Elias felt an odd mixture of awe and fear. He knew he could not remain there. It was far too dangerous to intrude. Yet he couldn't simply leave without acknowledging the moment. On impulse, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object he had been carrying, a simple earth charm, a small carved stone in the shape of a leaf. It was a trinket, nothing important, but it reminded him of home. He placed it quietly on the edge of the bench, just within reach, and backed away without making a sound. The princess did not look up. Elias was about to turn and leave when he noticed her hand move slightly toward the stone. Her fingers brushed it, and for a moment her posture changed. She seemed curious. The shaking of her shoulders slowed, and a faint shimmer of gratitude, or perhaps recognition, crossed her face. Elias did not stay to see more. He slipped back into the shadows of the corridor, his heart pounding. Back in his quarters, Elias could not shake the image of the crying princess. He had seen kings and diplomats, warships and negotiations, but nothing like this. For a brief moment, the galaxy's grand illusions had cracked, and he had glimpsed something real, something human. Over the next few days, Elias found himself thinking about that moment constantly. The palace routines went on as usual. Sarilith attended meetings, gave speeches, and appeared to everyone as composed as ever. Yet Elias noticed subtle differences. In the council chambers, she seemed more attentive to what he said, occasionally offering small nods or glances that others might not notice. When they were assigned to review a treaty amendment together, she did not hesitate to ask for his opinion. And when she smiled, it was brief but genuine, as if sharing a secret no one else could see. Elias did not understand why he, of all humans, had drawn this attention. He was careful to remain professional, never attempting to flatter or impress her. He asked questions, listened, and offered honest answers, nothing more. But it seemed that was enough. Sarilith was drawn to his authenticity, a quality rare in the corridors of power. One evening, the negotiations extended past their usual hours. Most delegates had departed, leaving only a handful of aides and minor officials. Elias was reviewing a set of cultural agreements when a soft sound caught his attention. He looked up to see the princess stepping lightly into the same garden where he had first seen her crying. Her expression was unreadable in the dim light, and for a moment he thought he should leave, but something compelled him to follow at a discreet distance. The garden was quiet, the hum of alien flora filling the air. Sarilith walked to the same stone bench, her hands folded in front of her. She paused, then sat down slowly, staring at the glowing flowers around her. Elias stood behind a low hedge, watching. The moment was fragile, delicate, and he did not want to disturb it. After several minutes, she spoke, her voice soft but carrying a hint of vulnerability. Elias could not hear the words clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a private conversation, as if she were speaking to herself. He understood then that this garden was her refuge, the one place where she could be herself without judgment. Elias thought about the charm he had left. He had meant it as a simple gesture, an acknowledgement that someone else had noticed her pain. But now he realized it had done more than that. It had given her a tiny measure of comfort, a reminder that not everyone saw her as untouchable or distant. And in a world where every action was scrutinized and every word measured, that was powerful. Over the following weeks, their paths crossed more frequently. Sometimes it was in the garden, sometimes during meetings where they were assigned to work together, and occasionally in the quiet corridors of the palace late at night. Each interaction was small, subtle, yet carried weight. Elias listened when she spoke, asked questions, and respected her opinions. He never attempted to dominate conversations or show off knowledge. He was human, ordinary, and genuine, and that seemed to matter more than he could have imagined. The more Elias observed, the more he realized how different humans were compared to the Virene and other alien races in the Alliance. Humans were messy, emotional, and unpredictable. But they were also capable of empathy, creativity, and resilience in ways that no protocol or tradition could replicate. For Sarilith, who had spent her life following rules and expectations, this human way of living was astonishing. She began to look forward to the small interactions with Elias, moments that reminded her there was more to life than duty and appearances. Elias, for his part, found himself drawn to her courage, the quiet strength it took to rule, to maintain composure, and yet allow herself moments of vulnerability. He admired her, not as a princess or a symbol, but as a person navigating impossible expectations with grace. The more he saw her cry, laugh, or pause to notice the world around her, the more he understood the depth of her character. One evening, as the twin moons of the Virene system rose over the palace, Elias once again found himself in the garden. He watched as Sarilith moved among the glowing plants, her expression contemplative. She stopped at a particularly bright flower and touched it gently. Then, without turning, she spoke his name. Elias froze. It was the first time she had spoken to him directly outside of duty or formal discussion. He stepped forward cautiously. "You saw me," she said softly. "That night you didn't look away." Elias nodded, unsure of what to say. Words felt inadequate. She smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and something else he could not yet name. "Most would have pretended not to notice," she continued. "But you saw me, and that matters." For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them, the glowing plants and the quiet hum of the garden. Elias felt the weight of the moment, but also a strange warmth. He realized that what he had done, something so small, so human, had made a difference. I didn't know what else to do, he admitted, keeping his voice low. I just wanted you to know someone cares. She nodded, as if understanding completely. Then, almost imperceptibly, she leaned back and closed her eyes, breathing in the alien night air. Elias felt a sense of calm he had not experienced before. In that instant, the barriers of race, tradition, and expectation seemed to fade, leaving only the connection of two beings recognizing each other's humanity. Elias knew then that something had changed. He did not yet understand the depth of it, but he felt a quiet certainty that their paths had intertwined in a way that could not be undone. And for Sarilith, that single acknowledgement, that human gesture, had planted the seed of a realization she would carry with her through the trials and politics of the galaxy. For the first time in her life, she had been seen, not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as herself. As Elias walked back to his quarters that night, the stars above the palace seemed brighter, almost alive. He did not know what the future held, only that something profound had begun. Somewhere deep in the palace, the princess smiled to herself, a small, genuine smile, for she had felt the touch of humanity in its purest form. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. Days passed, and the palace continued its rhythm of precise activity. Delegates from across the galaxy met in the grand halls, their discussions filled with complex protocols and interstellar politics. Elias Ward moved among them as quietly as he could, always observing, always listening. Though he had no rank that demanded attention, he had begun to notice something subtle. Sarilith, the princess he had first seen in the garden, seemed to find him more often than coincidence could explain. At first, he thought it was chance. Perhaps the palace was just small despite its grandeur. But over time, patterns emerged. During council sessions, her gaze would linger briefly on him, a subtle acknowledgement. In the corridors, she would ask questions about human customs, sometimes just to hear his perspective. Elias had grown used to the quiet curiosity, and he found himself looking forward to their small conversations more than he expected. The first real moment of shared understanding came one afternoon in the central library of the palace. The library was enormous, its ceiling stretching high above, filled with floating holographic books and shelves carved from a smooth, reflective stone. Sarilith was there, reviewing a set of diplomatic records. Elias approached with caution, holding a translation pad filled with notes from the human delegation. "You understand these?" she asked without looking up, her voice calm but direct. "I think so," Elias replied. "Some of the phrasing is unusual, but the meaning is clear enough." She glanced at him briefly, and for a moment he saw something that seemed almost human in her expression: interest. She had spent her life following expectations and traditions, yet now she was asking him, an ordinary human, for insight. "You explain things simply," she said, almost thoughtfully. "Other diplomats use words as shields. You don't." Elias felt a flush of pride and surprise. He had never considered his style remarkable. "I just speak honestly," he said quietly. "I think it's better than hiding behind titles and ceremonies." She looked at him fully then, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand the meaning behind his words. "Perhaps that is why I find your presence refreshing," she admitted. Her voice was low, hesitant, as if she feared that speaking openly might be forbidden. Over the following days, their interactions became more frequent. Sarilith asked about human customs, about the small pleasures and frustrations of life on Earth. Elias explained the simple things: how humans celebrated birthdays, how they appreciated music, how stories were passed from one generation to the next. She listened intently, asking questions that revealed a sharp mind but also a yearning for something more than duty. Elias began to see the cracks in her perfectly composed exterior. She smiled when she laughed at small jokes, her eyes lighting up in a way that her courtiers would never have witnessed. She frowned when faced with frustrating protocols, muttering quietly to herself before regaining composure. She was, in every way, human beneath the layers of royalty and expectation. One evening, the palace held a formal banquet to honor visiting delegates. Elias had been assigned to assist with the event, ensuring that cultural protocols were respected and documents were in order. The hall was magnificent, filled with towering windows that revealed the city below and the twin moons rising above the horizon. Delegates from countless worlds moved gracefully, exchanging pleasantries and discussing treaties in a myriad of languages. Elias found himself observing Sarilith from a distance. She moved with elegance, speaking to each guest with measured grace, her smile unwavering. Yet beneath that perfection, Elias sensed a quiet fatigue. He remembered the princess he had first seen in the garden, alone and vulnerable, and he realized that this composed exterior was a mask she wore for the galaxy. Later, when the banquet ended and most guests had departed, Elias was assigned to help clear the tables in a side hall. He noticed a figure seated alone in the corner. It was Sarilith, her posture slumped slightly, her face tired. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. "You are here," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of relief. "I suppose it is good to see a familiar face." Elias nodded. "I could say the same for you." She gestured to the empty space beside her, and he sat down carefully, mindful of the etiquette that surrounded her. For a few moments they sat in silence, the hum of the palace around them. "I did not expect humans to understand," she said finally. "I thought you would be too distracted by your own concerns, too busy following rules and schedules." "I don't know if I understand everything," Elias admitted, "but I try to listen. That is what humans do, I think. We notice. We care." She looked at him then, her gaze steady. "It is rare to be noticed, to be seen not as a symbol but as oneself." Elias felt a warmth in his chest. "I think everyone deserves that," he said quietly. They spoke late into the night, sharing stories of their worlds, their lives, and their dreams. Elias told her about Earth, the vast oceans, the mountains, the forests, and the cities. He spoke of humans' imperfections, their mistakes, and their resilience. Sarilith listened, fascinated, occasionally laughing softly at his descriptions or shaking her head in disbelief. In return, she shared moments of her life in the palace, the pressures of her role, and the expectations that weighed heavily upon her. For the first time, Elias felt he was not just an observer but a participant in something profound. The walls of tradition and protocol that had seemed so impenetrable were slowly giving way to trust, understanding, and a bond that neither of them could have anticipated. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, Sarilith stopped and turned to Elias. "I think I am beginning to understand humans," she said. "You choose even when the choices are hard. You value connection, honesty, and resilience. And yet, you do not pretend to be perfect." Elias smiled, feeling a sense of pride and humility. "We are not perfect," he said. "But we try, and sometimes that is enough." She nodded, her eyes distant for a moment as if reflecting on a lifetime of expectations. I envy that," she admitted softly. "To be able to choose to live without the weight of tradition pressing on every step." Elias stopped walking and looked at her fully. "Perhaps one day you can," he said. "It may not be easy, but it is possible. You have the strength and you are not alone." For the first time, Sarilith smiled without restraint. It was a quiet, genuine smile, and it reached her eyes. "Perhaps," she said softly. As days turned into weeks, their interactions deepened. Elias learned to read the subtle signals of her moods, noticing when she needed comfort or space. Sarilith, in turn, began to trust him with thoughts and feelings she had never shared with anyone else. Their bond was not romantic in the traditional sense, but it was profound, a connection based on understanding, empathy, and the quiet courage to be oneself in a world that demanded perfection. One morning, while reviewing treaty documents in a sunlit corridor, Elias noticed Sarilith watching him from across the hall. She approached quietly, her steps measured and deliberate. "Elias," she said softly, "you have a way of seeing things, not just the surface but the heart of them. It is unusual and yet it feels right." Elias felt a flush of warmth at her words. "I only do what I can," he replied. "I notice what is there, not what is expected." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "That is why I appreciate your presence," she admitted. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, carrying a sincerity that few could perceive. In that moment, Elias realized something profound. This princess, admired across the galaxy, had begun to see him, not as a human diplomat, not as an aide, but as a person. And in doing so, she was teaching him as much as he was teaching her. That courage could take many forms, even in silence, in empathy, and in the simple act of being genuine. The bond between them continued to grow. They shared quiet conversations in the palace garden, walked together through the glowing corridors, and exchanged insights about their worlds. Elias came to understand the immense pressure Sarilith faced, the weight of her family's expectations, the rigid protocols of the Alliance, and the constant scrutiny of the galaxy. And yet, she faced it all with grace and a quiet determination that inspired him. Sarilith, in turn, found solace in Elias' presence. In his honesty, she discovered a freedom she had never known. In his understanding, she found a companion who could see beyond the facade of royalty and recognize the person beneath. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to hope that perhaps, one day, she could make choices not dictated by tradition, but by her own will. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the palace, Elias found himself once again in the garden. The soft glow of the alien flora bathed the courtyard in gentle light. Sarilith approached, her expression calm but thoughtful. "You have changed something within me," she said softly. "You have shown me that it is possible to be seen, to be understood, and to choose. I do not know where this path will lead, but I am grateful." Elias felt a lump in his throat. "I did nothing extraordinary," he said. "I only noticed you and I treated you as a person. That is all." She smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Perhaps that is enough," she said. As they walked together through the garden, the quiet hum of the plants surrounding them, Elias realized that their connection was not bound by politics, duty, or expectation. It was something more profound, a bond forged through understanding, empathy, and the courage to be authentic in a world that often demanded perfection. And in that moment, both of them understood that the galaxy would never see them the same way again. The palace buzzed with a quiet tension that Elias could feel the moment he stepped into the grand hall. The human delegation had been noticing strange looks, whispers, and subtle gestures ever since Sarilith had begun spending more time with him. Though no one had spoken openly, it was clear that their relationship, whatever it was stirring curiosity, and perhaps concern, among the more traditional alien factions. Elias adjusted his sleeve nervously as he walked down the hall. He was only a human aide, but he could feel the weight of the palace's expectations pressing down. In the last few weeks, Sarilith had grown increasingly bold, seeking his counsel, walking with him in the gardens, and even asking him questions during formal meetings. She had begun to trust him in ways that surprised both of them. And yet, with that trust came risk. During a council session that day, representatives from multiple species gathered to discuss trade routes, cultural agreements, and security protocols. Elias observed from his usual seat, quietly taking notes and ensuring that no human misstep could upset the delicate balance of diplomacy. Sarilith presided over the meeting with her usual grace, her voice calm and her gaze steady. Yet, Elias noticed something different. She occasionally glanced at him, just enough for him to meet her eyes. There was a softness in her expression, a subtle acknowledgement that he was present, not merely as an aide, but as someone who mattered. After the session ended, Sarilith approached him quietly, away from the crowd. "Elias," she said softly, "I feel pressure. The council, they notice, and they do not understand humans as we do. They see your presence as unusual." Elias nodded, understanding the implications. The other species viewed humans as unpredictable, emotional, and often reckless. These were not qualities the Virene admired in diplomacy. "I know," he said gently, "but being human doesn't mean being dangerous. It means being honest, choosing what is right and caring about others. That is our strength." Sarilith studied him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and concern. "I wish it were that simple in my world," she said. "Choices are rarely ours to make. Expectations follow us like shadows, and every step is watched. Every action is judged." Elias placed a hand lightly on her arm, not in a gesture of possession but of solidarity. "Then perhaps we can find a way together to make choices, even if small ones, in the midst of expectation." She nodded slowly, a hint of a smile appearing on her lips. "Perhaps," she said, her voice almost a whisper. The following days brought a subtle shift in the palace atmosphere. Delegates whispered about the human and the princess, casting suspicious glances, wondering why someone so ordinary could hold the attention of royalty. Rumors spread quietly that Elias was influencing decisions, that the princess was acting outside protocol. These murmurs were harmless at first, but they carried the weight of potential conflict. One afternoon, Elias was summoned to a private audience with a senior Virene minister. The minister was a tall, imposing figure with a reputation for strict adherence to tradition. His voice was calm but carried a weight of authority. "You have caught the attention of Princess Sarilith," he said, studying Elias carefully. "While your presence has been tolerated, it is becoming problematic. The council grows uneasy. Humans are unpredictable. Your influence may be dangerous." Elias took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I am not here to influence anyone improperly," he said. "I only speak honestly and observe respectfully. If my presence causes concern, I will step back." The minister raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "It is not your presence alone," he said. "It is the bond you share with the princess. She is expected to follow her family's guidance, not the counsel of an outsider. You must understand the risk. One misstep could have consequences for both you and your people." Elias nodded slowly. He understood. The alliance was built on centuries of tradition, and humans were newcomers. To challenge those traditions, even unintentionally, could create tension. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I will not act against her will. That is her choice to make, not mine." The minister studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but be cautious. The galaxy watches, and even the smallest action can ripple far beyond your understanding." Elias left the audience, his thoughts heavy. He returned to the garden later that evening, seeking the calm he had found there before. Sarilith was waiting, seated beneath the glowing flora, her posture tense. "They have noticed," she said quietly, not looking at him. "The council, they speak in whispers. They fear what they do not understand. Humans are unpredictable, and you have drawn their attention." Elias sat beside her, careful to respect her space. "That is true," he said softly, "but it does not change what is right. You deserve to make choices, even in the face of expectation, and I will support you, whatever path you take." She turned to him then, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the garden. "It is frightening," she admitted, "to know that my decisions may upset the balance, that my actions may cause unrest. Yet with you, I feel possibility, a freedom I have never known." Elias reached out, gently touching her hand. "Then hold on to that feeling. It is worth it. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the choice to move forward despite it." Over the next week, their bond became even more apparent. They met quietly in the gardens, spoke softly in empty corridors, and exchanged insights on diplomacy, culture, and the human way of life. Sarilith began to see the value in small choices, the importance of empathy, and the power of authenticity. She began to question long-held assumptions, wondering if the galaxy might be different if people were allowed to act from their hearts rather than tradition. Elias, for his part, grew more aware of the risks they faced. Other species were beginning to take note, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. The human presence was unusual, and the alliance was built on predictable behavior. Yet he remained steadfast, knowing that the connection they shared was genuine and important. One evening, while walking through a quiet corridor, Sarilith spoke to him with a seriousness that caught his attention. "Elias, I fear the Council may try to separate us," she said. "They may demand you leave or assign you elsewhere. They do not understand what humans bring what you bring." Elias stopped walking, turning to face her. "Then we will face that challenge together," he said. "I do not seek to disrupt the Council. I only wish to be honest, to be present, and to support you. If they demand my departure, I will respect the rules, but know this, I will not abandon you." She looked at him, her eyes wide with emotion. You do not understand the weight of what you say," she whispered. "To defy tradition, even quietly, is dangerous. Yet somehow, with you, it feels right." The days that followed were tense. Delegates whispered more openly, casting glances that were meant to unsettle them. Some tried subtle intimidation, questioning Elias' authority, implying that his presence might lead to mistakes. Sarilith, however, remained calm, her composure tested but unbroken. She spoke firmly, defending his right to be present, while also acknowledging the human perspective in her discussions. Elias marveled at her courage. The princess, who had once seemed fragile in private moments, now stood strong in public, using her voice to assert what she believed to be right. Her actions were quiet but powerful, demonstrating that strength came not from domination or fear, but from authenticity, empathy, and the courage to choose. One afternoon, they met in the palace garden, as they had done so often. Sarilith walked among the glowing plants, her expression contemplative. "Elias," she said softly, "I am beginning to see the power of choice. Even small actions, even quiet defiance, they can change hearts, perhaps even the galaxy." Elias smiled, feeling a sense of pride and hope. "That is the human way," he said. "We do not always have strength in numbers or in tradition, but we have courage, honesty, and the ability to connect. That is our power." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the garden. "And yet, it is not easy," she admitted. "Every choice carries risk. Every action has consequences. I fear what the Council might do, what the other species might think." Elias took her hand gently, offering reassurance. "Fear is natural, but courage is choosing to move forward despite it. You have that courage, Sarilith, and you are not alone." For a long moment they stood together in silence, the hum of the alien flora filling the air. Elias realized that their bond had grown beyond simple friendship or curiosity. It was a connection built on trust, understanding, and the courage to defy expectation quietly but firmly. Later that evening, Elias returned to his quarters, reflecting on the events of the day. He knew that the challenges ahead would not be easy. The Council's scrutiny, the whispers of other species, and the expectations placed upon Sarilith would create obstacles. Yet he also knew that the bond they shared was genuine, and that it could withstand the pressures of the galaxy. He thought of the first night he had seen her cry in the garden, of the small charm he had left, and of the trust they had built since. That single moment had grown into something profound, a connection that defied tradition, challenged expectations, and reminded both of them that humanity, in its simplicity and honesty, could inspire courage even in the most rigid of worlds. As the twin moons rose over the palace, Elias looked out the window, feeling a quiet determination. The challenges ahead were many, but he understood one truth. Sometimes the smallest acts, the simplest gestures, and the quietest courage could change the course of lives and perhaps even the course of a galaxy. The palace felt colder that morning, though the air itself did not. Change. Elias noticed it in the way servants moved more quickly, and in the way delegates paused at doors to lower their voices. He had lived long enough among the stars to know that silence often meant something was wrong. He tightened his grip on the data pad and walked toward the council chamber. Inside, the room hummed with polite formality. Representatives from long-lived species took their carved seats. The Virene elders sat in a carved arc, their faces smooth and unreadable. Sarilith entered last, as always. She moved with the same careful grace that made cameras and courtiers praise her posture. Yet Elias could see the small change at the edge of her composure, a tired set to her jaw, a softness to her eyes that had not been there months before. The meeting began with routine matters: trade corridors, cultural exchanges, adjustments to shipping lanes. Elias took notes, keeping his tone neutral and his hand steady. He watched Sarilith speak. She spoke calmly, as a ruler must, but her glances toward him came more often. Once their eyes met and held for a heartbeat. He felt both seen and exposed by that look. After the chamber emptied, a senior minister asked to speak with Elias. They met in a narrow antechamber, the walls reflecting lights like distant stars. The minister did not waste words. "Your presence draws attention," the minister said. He spoke Virene, slightly accented, his voice a low instrument. "There are whispers. Other houses do not like changes to custom. They do not trust outsiders, especially when those outsiders are near our heirs." Elias kept his voice even. "I do not seek power," he said. "I only listen and speak plainly. I do not control Sarilith. She is free to make her own decisions." The minister watched him as if weighing a scale. "Choice is not a simple thing for our house," he said. "It is woven into our laws. When an heir chooses, it changes more than one life. It shifts alliances. It forces old patterns to break. Some will welcome that, others will resist." Elias nodded. He understood the risk in principle. He also understood the heart behind it. "If she chooses, she must choose for herself," he said. "You will learn her choice more truly if she is allowed to make it without fear." The minister's expression did not soften. "That is an argument for the learned and the brave," he said. "But the Alliance values stability over ideals, human as you are." Elias left with a slow breath. The words followed him through the gardens and into the place where he had first seen Sarilith cry. He found her there, sitting beneath a low tree whose leaves pulsed like quiet lanterns. She did not look surprised to see him. "They talk," she said simply. "They think I will be swayed by a human-esque compassion. They whisper about scandal, about weakness." "You are neither weak nor scandalous," Elias said. "You are allowed to be human, to feel. That is not a problem." She turned to him then, and for a moment he saw the full weight she carried. "You speak as if you know all my faults and all the rules that bind me," she said. "But you do not know how my family will react. You do not know what they have planned." Elias could not claim knowledge he did not have. "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me what you fear." She took a long breath. "They have already arranged a union," she said. "Not as in marriage for love, a joining to bind houses. It will increase our influence. It will stabilize our house line. My choice, they say, is to accept. To accept is to be what my family needs. To refuse is to invite their anger." Elias felt his stomach drop. "Is there time?" he asked. "There is always time until a ceremony starts," she said flatly. "But decisions are pushed toward a day. Announcements will come soon." He thought of his own small world of choices made at kitchen tables, not carved in marble. He thought of the way humans argued and then forgave, the way ordinary people could choose again and again. "Then you must have time to think," he said, "and to choose without being pushed." Her eyes flashed, and for the first time he saw anger cross her face in a quiet, sharp line. "You speak as if it is only my family that binds me," she said. "There are allies who depend on the joining. There are elders who say my refusal would cause instability. They say I must be predictable." Elias studied her face. He had seen poise born of schoolings and rituals, but he now saw an ember of rebellion. It was small, not loud, but it lived there. He felt respect flare inside him like a small, private comet. "People can change," he said. "Ways of ruling can change. You do not have to carry their past on your shoulders." She smiled, but it was a tired smile. "It may not be so easy, but your belief in change gives me courage I did not expect. Rumors, like birds, travel quickest to the highest branches." Within days the murmur grew louder. Delegates from neighboring houses began to test the ground. Small slights were offered, a note misplaced, a subtle delay in delivering documents, a pointed comment in a private meeting. Elias saw the pattern. Most of it was polite. Some of it was cruel in the slow way of custom. Human diplomats began to sense the shift, too. They met in quiet rooms and spoke in blunt, warm terms that made their alien counterparts uneasy. "We must not abandon Elias," one of the human envoys said. "If they force him away, it is not only a loss for us. It is a loss for the idea that people can be more than their roles." Others nodded, though the human delegation was small and newcomers to this web of tradition. The ambassador sent a formal request to the council, a plea for Elias to remain in his position for the duration of the talks. The request was polite and respectful. It framed Elias' presence as beneficial to all parties, an honest voice amid the artful speech of others. The response came slowly, carved in formal language and heavy with meaning. The council would consider the request. That word, consider, felt like both a promise and a gavel. Saralith and Elias met that night under the same lantern tree. She held a folded paper in her hands. "They will discuss your position at the next council meeting," she said. "They will speak of duty, of image, of alliance. They will speak of you as if you are a tool rather than a person." "I do not need them to call me anything but what I am," he said. "But I know how this world speaks. Their words can carry weight. I will not force you into anything." She looked at him, and something like relief softened her features. "Thank you," she said, "for not trying to control what I do. It is easier to trust someone who does not try to own my choice." Trust had its costs. The next council meeting became a testing ground. Allies lined up with careful speeches. A few elder houses spoke of tradition as a bedrock that held peace. Others, more cautious, pointed at the risks of change. A Virene minister gave a long address about duty and the need for heirs to be predictable. He said it elegantly, as if reciting a hymn. When the ambassador spoke in favor of Elias, he did so politely but firmly. He touched on the human ability to connect across cultures, on the value of honest counsel. He argued that removing Elias would not solve the problem. It would make people bend stronger under pressure, fearful to act kindly. The speech was modest but clear. After hours of words, the council called for a vote, not on Elias himself, but on a formal motion to clarify the roles of foreign aides during royal proceedings. It was a slow way to require his reassignment if they wished. The vote split, not a roar but a ripple. Some supported the motion, citing caution. Others opposed it, citing openness. The motion passed by a thin margin. Elias read the official decree in a corridor lit by pale glass. It stipulated that foreign aides could be reassigned at the council's discretion to prevent unintended influence. It was polite. It was deadly in its simplicity. He went to Saralith that night, the decree folded in his hand like a paper swallow. He found her in a small salon where she sometimes read privately. She did not look surprised. Her eyes met his, clear and steady. "They will move me," Elias said. "The council gave them a path." She set the paper down without touching it. "They have always had a path," she said. They prefer paths, but paths are only firm when everyone walks them without question. He felt anger rise, hot and human and bright. "I will not be moved," he said. "I will not be treated like something fragile and easy to hide." She took his hands in hers. Her touch was cool, not cold. "You must understand the damage your stay may cause," she said. "If the council forces you away and I openly defy them, houses will speak of instability. They may use that word to justify harsh actions. I do not want to be the cause of harm." Elias swallowed. He had thought the challenge was only to keep his job. Now he saw a larger truth. Her choice would not be only about two people. It would press on families, trade, and the balance of entire systems. "We could leave," he proposed suddenly. "We could leave quietly. I could go back to the human delegation, but I will come back. If it is your voice that must be heard, I will not demand anything." She looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. "Leaving to return later is still a choice you make under pressure," she said. "If you leave now, they can say my bond with you was forced. I do not wish my decisions to be a weapon or a shield to anyone." He felt the room narrow like a throat. "Then what do we do?" Sarilith closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, her gaze had a quiet burn. "We continue as we have," she said. "We speak plainly and act honestly. I will not hide my trust in you, but I will also not force you to take risks for me that you do not choose. Your moral courage is not mine to spend." They sat in silence, the palace breathing around them. Outside, the city thrummed with night markets and low song. Inside, two people sat between tradition and change and tried to map a path no treaty could chart. The next morning brought a new challenge. A visiting house sent a carefully worded invitation, a formal ceremony to meet with Sarilith and propose a binding alliance. The invitation carried the weight of centuries. It meant a step toward the very joining Sarilith feared. She read the message in the privacy of the garden, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. She did not look at Elias when she spoke. "They expect me to present a favorable response in 1 week," she said. "A public acceptance would be ideal for them. It would seal things." Elias felt the clock tighten. "Then we have a week," he said. "A week to show them that your choices are not just your family's property and that the alliance can survive honesty." She turned to him, and for a moment she was only Sarilith the human, not Sarilith the princess. The hint of a smile touched her lips. "Then we will start by telling truth," she said. "Not to the council yet, but to ourselves. We will test what we can and see what ground others choose to give." It was a plan small as a seed. It was fragile. It might not change anything. But it was theirs. In a world welded to expectation, that mattered. They began in small ways. Sarilith asked questions in meetings that cut through scripts. She thanked speakers for their honesty and invited alternate viewpoints. She walked through markets where ordinary citizens could see her without velvet and ritual. She sent emissaries to listen, not to command. The palace noticed. Some smiled politely, others scowled. The council prepared to act. The visiting house prepared a speech for Sarilith to accept the alliance. The human delegation prepared a brief to argue against forced reassignment. And two people held their simple promise to one another: to be honest, to choose, and to let the truth, however fragile, find its place. He saw the alien princess cry and realized she chose him.